much. Like the gentleman said, my name is Jerome Washington. Um, Born and raised in Albion, Michigan, if any of you are familiar with Albion. I just want to take a minute. Tell you just briefly before my wife comes up, because she's going to take over, how I got into this. Primarily, all my life, I just, like many kids, I sketch, draw all my life. My mom and dad discovered that I was pretty good at drawing things. My mom would get me papers and pencils as she could find them and allow me to sketch as much as I could. And to keep this short, I started drawing cartoons, and I just got infatuated with it. Cartoons, I couldn't get enough comic books to be able to sketch from comic books and things like that. And then as time moved on, I started working and experimenting with images of minority children, cartoons, and we even came up with a name for it called Brown Sugar. Uh, and I kind of stayed with that for many years. Then during my wife was telling me about stories that she was reading, or books that she was reading, her historical books. I am not a historian. My wife is, and she was the one that really came up with this concept or this idea, because of the books that she would read and the material that she would read from her history. Going to the library and picking up occasionally a book about African American history. And of course, me, okay, I'm not that much interested in history at all until a little later in my time growing up. I did get involved in a little bit of World War II. When I say World War II, I say movies, not books. But my wife, she dug deeper into history. And she would take me aside many times and tell me what she'd been reading. And of course, being that I love my wife, I had to, of course, sit and act like I'm here and listening to this. But the more she talked about it, I got myself, I never knew that about certain people in history, particularly in African American history, until my wife. And we were, maybe it's been about 2 years. She decided that she wanted to do something a little different than what we were doing with the brown sugar characters that we created. And she started telling me about these hidden women of color. And I said, she got the idea from reading books from the library and things like that about women who were primarily was not getting the attention they deserve being in Black American history. They weren't mentioned like some of the general women that we know of, Harriet Tubman and women like that. She just got intrigued with these women that were not getting the attention that we generally give to other women in history. So she came up with the idea. She says, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you take a break from what you're doing with those cartoon characters, brown sugar and things, and let's do something with bringing attention to people about these African American women that not getting the general attention that they should get." So I asked her, I said, well, exactly what do you want me to do? So we came up with this. So she gave me we started out with a couple of names that she wanted me to start with. So I said, okay, I'll go ahead and do what I can, having no idea what kind of attention it was going to draw as far as the audience was concerned. But as I listened to my wife and knowing that she doesn't get involved in something like this unless she's really given some thought to it. So I did. I came up with a few pictures and we started from that. And then she said, hey, how about this lady, this woman, this lady? And she would explain to me exactly what these women did in the time period that they were alive. And so the more I did, the more myself, not being a historian, got involved in these women's lives myself and understanding what part they played in our history as an American. Not just white Americans, black Americans, just Americans. So as I dove more deeper into these women's lives, I became really deeply interested in history. Not just black history, but history, period. And these women helped me to have a better respect for men and women of America who did what God had raised them up to do, to bring attention to people that normally would not get the attention that they would get. And so these were just the starters. We ended up with 10 images. We've exhibited them, some of them already in Kalamazoo, not Kalamazoo necessarily, but in Battle Creek at the KCC library. We had, they wanted us to exhibit some of the portraits that we had available. We had 10 available, and they asked us to bring them over prior to the pandemic, if we bring them over and exhibit them there. So that was a starter for us. And you know, I come from a family of 14 children. And as you know, when you come from a family that large, you get to really get a good grasp of what people would want us to play a part when it comes to telling the story of our families. And as we gathered around at family reunions, as you know, when you 14 children and they got children, and then of course they have children, everybody's talking about the past. So that was always interesting to me to hear my uncles, my aunts, nephews, things like that, that were older, of course, tell the story about being in the Washington family. And you can't help but listen. So I think, in general, I think that's probably where my interest in history started, with the family reunion stories that we would have. Everybody can identify with that, because you yourself know when you get together with your family at reunions, what is it? What is the middle of the discussion? The past. Men and women in your family, whether you knew them or not, in a personal way, yet you hear the story about what part they played in your history of your family. So as I grew up and as I got older, I realized, working with this and hearing the stories about these men and women, I came to the conclusion, man, this whole family tree thing is very important. And as time went on, I got more involved in it with my wife. She would tell me the stories about these women, and I would really get involved in listening about what these women and their involvement. So, keep this short. In doing so, I was asked from the Kalamazoo, uh, her name is Sonia Hollins. She asked me if I would also, because she saw what we were doing, come up with a coloring book for the city of Albion, for the city of Kalamazoo. And she gave me a little bit of what would be involved. So after this program, after we speak, I brought some material in for you to be able to, over here at the table, to gaze and look at what we're presently working with and working on. So, being with that out of the way, I'm going to allow my wife to come up and do her part. And I'm going to tell you, she's going to do it much better than I would. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Hello. Get my stuff together here. I dropped something.
Oh, man. I got it.
First of all, I thought I'd share with you. My husband kind of told you a little bit. He do have an interest in history. Don't let him fool you. He do. He does. But with me, growing up, I didn't really see a lot of African American people. You didn't see a lot of things in the history books and the textbooks and so on and all that kind of stuff. And years ago, I had a friend. She knew I had an interest in it, and so she gave me a book. And I started reading it. It was on African American women. And I started reading it, and I just got into it because it began to tell me about women that I really didn't give much thought about the past as far as what Black women were doing back in the day. But in this book, they began to tell you everyday happenings that were going on in these women's lives, women just like ourselves, women who were single, women who were married, women who had children, didn't have children, all kinds of different things. So anyway, I started reading the book, but because I had small children, I put aside. And I didn't go back to it for at least over 25 years. And just in the past couple of years did I go back to reading the book. The book is entitled, We Are Your Sisters. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's by a lady by the name of Dorothy Sterling. She did an excellent job on doing all the research through correspondence, diaries, newspaper clippings. A lot of librarians, especially Black librarians in the South. Matter of fact, back in the 50s, she would go through the front door of the library. The Black librarian would go through the back because they didn't allow Black people to go through the front door. But she would go to them and they would give a lot of information on these women. So anyway, the Hidden Women of Color came about because I'm into cards. And I do send a lot of cards to people. That's my way of connecting to people. And I thought that, why don't we put these women on some cards? Something that you can use, something you can share, and have a little bio on the back of it telling you about them so people are getting exposed. And you're sharing a piece of you, but you're sharing a piece of history as well. So that's how the creation of the Hidden Women of Color cards came about. But anyway, these hidden women, there's 10 of them. I'm gonna start back in the 1700s. The first of these women, as you can see, is Elizabeth Freeman. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. I hadn't. but they called her Mom Beth. Mom Beth was a slave. She was born in 1744, and one day she was going about her normal business, working and serving people and da 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 da. And there was a meeting going on. And at this time, it was some men and they were talking. And she heard these words that they were speaking. She heard the words, all men, all people are born free and equal. And when she heard those words, they fell on good soil. She took them literally. And she said, born free and equal. So she turned that over in her mind and she decided that she was one of those people. And she took it a step further. She went and sought out a lawyer and told him about the situation. And it's kind of interesting because the man listened to it and said he agreed with it, and he took the case. And they ended up suing the state of Massachusetts about that, those words, all people were born free and equal. Didn't that apply to me, to her? And won. So because she won, she was able to live the rest of her life as a free woman in Massachusetts. And even though it didn't change the law for all Black people, it kind of got the wheels to turn. Because if you really read history down the road, in the future, a lot of things began to fall down. So Elizabeth Freeman is one of the hidden women of color. The next woman of color is Mary Ellen Pleasant. Now, Mary Ellen Pleasant, I call her a Black woman of means. She grew up on the island of Nantucket, and she was put in charge of with this family called the Hussies. And they had a store. They were Quakers, and they were kind of well off. And her father, back then you couldn't, Black people didn't get no education, but her father wanted the Hussies he would send them some money to get her educated. But they saw something about Mary Ellen Pleasant. What they saw was this lady was a quick learner. She was quick on her feet, and she picked up on things. And so the Hussies saw it too. So they decided she don't need no education. She can work for us. So she worked in the store. And in that area, there was a lot of whaling going on and everything. So people came there and bought goods. And the thing is about Mary Ellen Pleasant is that she learned a lot of skills working in that store. She learned how to handle money. She learned how to greet people, talk to people, connect to people, how to sell things, all those different little things were skills. And she was able to network with other people. She learned bookkeeping. She learned about credit. She learned how that money, you got to make it work for you. She learned these little different things. Well, as time went on, she used those skills. She used the money that she got from a marriage that she got married to this one guy. I think he was Cuban or whatever, but he died and left her some money. She was able to use that. And one of the things that she used her money for, she used it to finance the Underground Railroad. She used it to help a lot of people who were fighting against slavery. And during the gold rush, she decided to go out there to San Francisco. So she took a boat and she went out there. One of the things that she was, she knew and that she did, she liked to see things firsthand. So as soon as she got to San Francisco, got off the boat, she walked through that town. You can imagine this is what, 1800s, all these people running there, looking for their fortune, looking for gold. So it was a dusty, dirty place. And as she walked the street, she saw that, she saw these people need a laundry. So this lady created a laundry business. People needed food. She created a food business, a catering business. And she saw these banks, and she saw people going to these banks, putting their gold in the banks. Now back then, they paid you with gold now. And so she would get her money in gold, take the gold to the bank, put it in the bank, and draw out silver. Then she would accumulate a lot of silver and sell it at a high price. And the difference in price, it was a profit for her. And she got in the habit of loaning money out to people. Lots of people. And it sounded like to me a lot of white men that she loaned it out to. But they had to pay her interest. So this lady had money, she accumulated wealth, but she made money work for her. She just didn't hold on to it. And she used it, she made it work for her, and she used it to help people. And she was instrumental in owning real estate. She helped to bring down some of the laws in San Francisco that told the black people, y'all could not get on this transportation because you're black. Well, she was instrumental in bringing some of those laws down. I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm not. We got to get on. So anyway, Mary Ellen Pleasant was a black woman of means. So she's our second. The next one is Mary S. P. Now, Mary S. P. Mary S. P. was a free black woman. She was born free in Virginia. And she got educated somewhat. And back then, it was against the law to teach black people how to read and write. But she did something against the law. She went ahead and taught black people how to read and write. But she did it secretly. And then the war broke out, the Civil War. And she was on the side where the Union was at. And on the Confederate side, the slaves began to escape from the southern part onto the Union side. And as they would escape, they came in groves, hundreds, children, trying to get free. But once they got there, Mary P. assessed the situation, and because she was one of the first black women to be hired by a philanthropy society, she came in there and started educating them children. And sometimes she would have at least 50 kids in the class, and she taught at night. This lady just worked and worked and worked. She ended up getting tuberculosis, but she worked up until the time she had tuberculosis and she passed away. But while she was teaching these kids and adults, she did it under this tree, this huge oak tree. And after the Civil War, the huge oak tree where she taught all them kids, they ended up making that property into the school called Hampton Institute, which today is called Hampton University. And I believe that tree is still there. It's a huge oak. So if you're ever in that area, I'm looking forward to going there and seeing it myself, because now I know about Mary P. and it's significant, you know. Now the fourth one, the fourth hidden women of color is Sarah Parker Redmond. Now Sarah Parker Redmond is, she was born like in 1824. She came from an abolitionist family. her whole family fought slavery. So that's all she knew. And the whole family. Some of them went on to become some great voices against slavery. And she was one of them. She just was not content in the status quo. You treat me like I'm nothing. She would go to the theaters, they would throw her out. They would tell her you cannot come in or you could not sit there. But she refused. And sometimes she got injured. And one particular time she got injured and she ended up taking the man to court. And she won. And as a result, they had to bring that law down about black people can't go in this particular place. And they had to allow them to come in. So she was instrumental in that. And she was a voice for the anti-slavery movement, abolitionists. And she ended up going to England as a voice for the anti-slavery movement and talking to just thousands of people, trying to get their attention about slavery and rising up and being against it. And she was very instrumental in that. While she was there, though, she decided to go to a college. It was called Bedford College. And she went there, ended up in Italy, ended up being a doctor, a baby doctor. Amazing, huh?
Yes.
Amazing. These women carved out a life for themselves despite what was going on around them. And that's inspirational. Now, the next lady that we have is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Now, Frances Ellen also, she traveled the circuit too against slavery, but she used it through poems. She was orphaned at a young age. Her uncle raised her uncle and her aunt. He was an abolitionist. And she became a voice for the Abolitionist Society, but she used her voice in writing. And she became one of the most popular Black poets during the 19th century. That was something I had never heard of, didn't know nothing about, but that was very delightful for me to hear that. One of the poems that she wrote, I got it right here. It's a verse. It's from the book, We Are Your Sisters. It's called Slavery Made Us Tough. And it says, the verse says, we soon got used to freedom, though the way at first was rough. But we weathered through the tempest, but slavery made us tough. Our next hidden women of color is Fannie Jackson Copeland. Fannie Jackson Copeland was an educator. She was a teacher. She was born a slave as well. But her aunt was able to purchase her freedom. And by the age of 14, she pretty much started on her own working. And at a young age, Fannie, it seemed she had a real desire to help her folk. And she went to school, ended up going to college. She went to Oberlin. She ended up, she was a very dynamic, innovative, very creative person, especially with the young people. And she just had a real heart to help her folks and everything. One of the things that one of her students said, I'm gonna read it to you. It said, this is one of the students. Finally, she asked me what I intended to be after leaving school. I promptly answered, a clerk. The prospect of sitting behind a desk and writing in big books seemed to me the remotest idea for a student. So Fannie, she led me to a desk and sat me in the chair next to mine. She sat in the chair next to him. And in language which was perfectly clear to me, I was just 10 years old, she pictured the great work to be done by specialists in the learned profession, great cures to be made by colored doctors, cases to be won by colored lawyers, books to be made by colored writers. And then she said to me, Mr. Vinny tells me that you like arithmetic. She said, I think I'll make you an engineer. And she did. From that time on until the day of the conferring of my degree, 16 years later, she was my constant advisor. Here was a teacher who knew the use of the power of words. She spoke life to that student. That's what she did. This was a young man, came out of slavery. She spoke life. She said, you can do it. You can do that, and you can do that, and you can do that. Don't look at all these circumstances. You can do it. Not only did Fannie Jackson educate her people and want something better, I'm not going to go into it, but she got a letter from Frederick Douglass. She was a great admirer of him, and she was sharing her passion for teaching and everything with him. I wanted to share that with you, but I'm not. It's kind of long. But one of the things she did do, these kids would graduate and learn stuff, but yet they would go out and not get no job. So Fannie, she would hit the street, and she would go knocking on doors and trying to get jobs for those students. She taught them, and then she went out there looking for jobs for them, trying to break down the doors. So anyway, she's one of the hidden women of color. Our next one is Edmonia Lewis. Now, I know y'all familiar with her because she's downstairs right now. But Miss Lewis was a Native American. I think she was her mother was Ojibwa or Chippewa. Her daddy was a gentleman's gentleman and everything. And she said that her father said, I saw your mom and I married her. And she said her mother, though she was married, she was Native American. She had her ways that she had learned from being Native American. So at times, she would still go back out into the wild with her people and travel. And so Edmonia picked up a lot of things from her mom. Well, Edmonia ended up going to Oberlin College, and she had a great desire for art. And while she was there, she was falsely accused of something. And when they accused her of this particular thing, some people took matters in their own hands. They beat her to a pulp and broke her leg. And she was on the verge. She never talked about it, but she was on the verge of leaving and going back to her old ways. But she said she had a consuming passion for art. And some of the abolitionists at that time gathered together and helped her out and sent her to this sculptor in Boston. And he was her mentor. And I think he instilled all the techniques and things. She had that desire for art and clay and molding and all that. And he helped her with that. And Edmonia ended up, as you know, she did the statue of Colonel Shaw, who was the leader of the 54th Black Regiment. and some other beautiful works of art. But she ended up going to Rome, and she ended up staying in Italy. She had her own studio, and she is supposed to have had at least 30 people working for her. So again, you don't know these things. Another hidden woman of color. Our next one is Dr. Eliza Greer. Dr. Eliza Greer, she too was born in slavery. She came out of it, and she decided at some point she wanted to help her folk. She became a doctor. Now get this, she went to school in 1884. She didn't graduate till 1897, but she did become a doctor. But what she did and how she did it was she would go to school one year and work the following year. Now, that's what you call focus. That's what you call being tenacious and keeping at something. And she ended up graduating, becoming a doctor in Georgia, one of the first women, African-American women doctors that were licensed. And the thing is, she graduated in 1897, and she passed away in 1902. So she practiced for at least 5 years. Okay, but again, another hidden woman of color. Did I do something? Let's see.
Is it moving?
Let's see. Okay, I think I got it. Yep. All right. Next, we have another doctor. Her name is Dr. Matilda Arabelle Evans. Dr. Matilda Arabelle Evans graduated from doctor school. She, what she did that was just quite amazing to me is after she graduated, she decided to start a hospital out of her home. And because back then, Black people couldn't just go to hospitals, doctors just didn't come to them. So she had the hospital right there in her home. So she had a lot of sick people there. And she ended up starting a hospital there. She ended up having a lot of work among the white women of the city, wealthy women. And the women loved her, and they would come to her with their issues because they wanted to keep things on the down low. And they would pay her handsomely for it. So she took that money and put it into creating a hospital for people of color, women and children especially, because there was a lot of women back in them days, a lot of children that just didn't have nothing, you know. So anyway, she started a hospital in her home, and she started not just that, but she started a nursing school. I got a picture of her in this room, and she got on her doctor stuff, and she got her nurses around her, and they, you know, is in a surgery. But it's so refreshing. My background is nursing, so I like that. And it's just so refreshing to see, here's a Black woman. She's a doctor, and she got the women around her. They're all Black. She's training them, and they're taking care of some people. And this didn't happen recently. This happened back in the day. That's just amazing, amazing. So she started that. She started a hospital by the name of Taylor Lane Hospital, and they fell into kind of hard times. For 3 months, she asked her staff to go without a salary, so until she get the money. So what she did, she went and started plowing up the soil around the hospital and using the soil to grow things, and that's how she was able to finance it too. But she went on to do a lot of great things in healthcare in that state, and a lot of the things that she did ended up being a template for the medical profession. The programs that they got today in the health system for children and women really come from a lot of what she did. She did the groundwork, and she went on to work in the World War I and other different things. So yeah, she's another great hidden woman of color. And then our last one is Merces Tape. Now, I'm pretty sure y'all probably didn't heard of Merces Tape, but she is from Michigan. And Merces Tape ended up going to Western College, which is really Western Michigan University. But she was the first African-American woman to graduate with a degree, teacher's degree from that college back in the 1920s. And when she finished, naturally she wanted to get a job. Excuse me. But she couldn't because she was Black. And they didn't hire Black teachers. Now, Western College said, okay, we trained you, we educated you. They didn't just throw her to the dogs, they helped her out. They found a spot for her. And they directed her to that spot. It was in another state, but she ended up going there and got a job and was able to work. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with this, but I remember the first time I heard about Merces Tape, it was after she had passed, it was in the newspaper. I think it was in Detroit Free Press. And it had up there, Black woman leaves $2 million to Western University after she had died. Well, that was Merces Tape. Merces Tape ended up going to Oxford. And she got a degree there, and then I think she's the first African-American woman to go there. She ended up being the first African woman to graduate from Western Teachers College. The lady went on to do a lot of great things. She was a world explorer. She traveled during the time, like during the Titanic time, that time. She traveled the world. She wrote books. She was a consult to, people, leaders. I think one of them was Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt. But she wrote these books on how to have geography. Yeah, she wrote books on geography, but she was still something of a scholar. But again, another hidden woman of color. So those are the 10 women. It's many more. This is just, tip of the iceberg. But they did amazing things because they carved out a life for themselves during a time when there was a lot of struggle against them. And but anyway, with that said, anybody got questions? Ready?
So you mentioned that you were that you didn't take to learning. Well, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Washington or not, but when you mentioned that you had not taken to history until later in life. How late in life did you really start really immersing yourself in Black history and history in general?
Okay. For myself, I started really doing it seriously probably in the last 10 years. But my kids was grown, so now I had the time. I couldn't, that's why I had to put this book away. I had no time. But there was a deep interest there. And my friend gave me that book and it just, whoo. And I would really advise y'all, if you can go to the library, check this out because it is really good. Because it's got letters from these women back in the day, in the 19th century, writing to people, telling you about stuff that was going on firsthand. Things that were going on in New York City, things that were going on the farm, things that are not in the history books. And you'll see these women, they too wanted marriage. They wanted a relationship. You will see some of this stuff. So it's just a really good reading. Also, I got some books over here. I can't go over there. But anyway, I got some books up here on some of these women. The first one, like Mary Ellen Pleasant, she, thank you, Jerome. This one is, this is on Sarah Redmond Parker, about her life abroad. And this one right here, I got from, about Mary Ellen Pleasant from Black Fortunes. This guy, he's Shamari Willis, he's good. He done dead deep. And then this one right here is on Mom Betty. Now, when my husband drew her, she's a kind of older lady here, but he decided to go and give her a more youthful look and everything. But she's an interesting lady here. She ended up working for the lawyer family. And the lawyer, one of his children, ended up painting her. The painting is this one. And really good reading. Gives you a background, again, on a lot of people and everything. Okay?
So, yeah, that relates to a question that I wanted to ask your husband. Did he have photos or sketches of these people, or was some of it from imagination and descriptions?
Most of these pictures are from photographs. Yeah. And like I said, he embellished or made her youthful is Mom Beth, Elizabeth Freeman. I'm trying to think to make sure I'm accurate here. I think most of them, is from photographs.
Yeah, let me, when my wife asked me to take on this particular work, I asked her, I said, well, what do you have for me to work from? So we just kind of went to the library and found what we could, as far as photographs. I'm particularly interested in drawing from photographs rather than just another artwork that somebody might have depicted that person in that time when they're sketching them. I'm not too warm. I don't warm up to that idea. I said, see if you can find me a photograph. So primarily, we were able to do so. We went to the library, did some digging, went online, Googled it, this and that, and see what we could dig up. And never failed. We would find us a photograph to work from. And that's where I took it from there. Just in case, a lot of people ask me, which is okay, what medium do I work in? And primarily, I like working in pastels and watercolor, pencil, ink, whatever. But as you can probably not quite tell, but primarily you can see some pastel in there and maybe a little bit of touch of watercolor in there. I kept it as simple as I could keep it because I knew that my wife would come to another, hey, I got another one for you. So I said, okay, all right. So I said, you better keep this simple, because you get wore down with, sketching and, and then you don't love it no more, But I said, okay, bring it on, so, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But my wife, when she, as you can tell, when she talks about these women, man, you just can't help but get involved in the story about these people. These are just ordinary people like me and you, but their circumstances were, of course, nothing like what they were. Our circumstances, we got issues too, but when you read these women, I said, Lord God, man.
They deserve, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
They do. And we my wife and I just got indulged ourselves in this story and telling how we can be of help to make sure that our people know about these men and women, these women. I think just real quick, over here on my table, you'll see some other material that I created with with the help of Sonia Hollins, you're familiar with her, and just want to make sure she gets credit for many of the things that my wife and I are working on with the coloring book and things like that. So,
Any more questions though? Feel free. If I can answer them, I do my best. Okay.
Pardon me?
which one was it?
Oh, that was Fannie Jackson Copeland. Yep. And you know, there is a school named after her. It's in the South. I just discovered it on Instagram. And I was hashtagging our cards, and you know how you put a hashtag in front of them, and it take you to so I followed it to see where it was going, and it took me right to the school. I said, look at her. So she's not as hidden as I thought, but at the same time, she is. A lot of people don't even know who this lady is and what she did. So,
I might want to add some. I was trying to convey to my wife when she was speaking that Merces Tape, as some of you might already know, she was a photographer, and she was good. So if you do your research and find out more about this woman from Western University here in Kalamazoo, she was a ferocious, a great photographer. She went all the way around the world taking photographs, and of course shared them when she got back to the university and things like that of her work as a photographer. So I said photographer, she said she said I said geography or something like that.
oh, you didn't, you said.
No,
Oh.
but it's photography.
Okay.
So when you look her up, yeah.
And also on Merces Tape, they just named a building at Western after her. Back in the fall, there was a big to-do, and they named a hall or a building after her. So that's pretty neat. Yeah. Anybody else? Is it 1 o'clock yet? Not that I'm in a rush.
No, your work is very nice. It's very enjoyable.
Well,
very
thank you.
informative.
Thank you, thank you. I hope it stirs all of us to go and delve deeper on history.
Indeed.
Yeah, because there's a lot there, a whole lot. How many remember where you were at in 1978 when we had that blizzard that hit the whole country? And it was during the time when Roots came out. How many are familiar with Roots? Pretty much everybody, huh? Yeah. Now that book and that show, that was, my parents are the old generation. They were sitting there looking at that. They got drawn into it. And at that time, I worked in the kitchen in Muskegon, and much younger. And when I would go into work that next morning, the talk of the kitchen was Roots. When I went home and turned on my radio, on the radio, that's all people talked about was that show. But it was like it kind of turned on the light, I think, for a lot of people. It got people interested in their roots, whites and blacks. Just got them into looking back into the past and finding out where you come from and your people. And very interesting. Yeah. So I guess that's no more questions. That ends it. Thank you for having